At Warsaw Airport, the crew of a lot Polish airlines Boeing 767 is cancelling their approach after a long flight from Newark. The landing gear appears to be stuck in the up position and won't budge. What will the crew do, and will they escape the dire situation? Let's get into it. But first, a very warm welcome to the many new subscribers. This channel has grown by over 50% since Monday, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you all. If you're new here, subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. Welcome to Airspace. On November 1st, 2011, LOT Polish Airlines Flight 16 had just departed from Newark. The crew had just successfully retracted the landing gear and the flaps of the Boeing 767 when they received an alert on the ACAS, that is the center screen of the instrument panel. See hydraulic sys press, which means that the pressure of the center hydraulic system had dropped to low levels and that the system had failed. Since there are two more hydraulic systems installed in the aircraft, the crew considered whether they should just accept the loss of redundancy and continue their flight. After careful consideration of the flight manuals and various departments at the LOT operational offices, the captain decided to continue the flight to Warsaw with just two hydraulic systems working. In that configuration, some redundancy was lost, but the most prominent factor they already knew at that point was the fact that they would not be able to extend the landing gear normally in Warsaw. That is due to the fact that the landing gear is solely operated using the center hydraulic system that had failed earlier. Instead, the landing gear can be extended by gravity only. This takes a while longer, but accomplishes the task of lowering the landing gear as well. The flight to Warsaw was uneventful after that initial failure, but when the plane was on final approach to runway 33 in Warsaw, the crew was presented with an unwelcome surprise. As they performed the alternate landing gear extension procedure, nothing happened. Baffled, the crew performed the procedure again, suspecting that they had done the procedure incorrectly. But to no avail, the landing gear would not budge. At that point, the captain decided to cancel the approach and perform the go-around. The airport was notified about the predicament of the plane and the crew declared an emergency. Initially, the plane now proceeded to a nearby holding pattern. The captain remained at controls while the first officer started to look for possible solutions. He rechecked whether the procedure had really been done right, which it had, twice. In the meantime, two F-16 fighters of the Polish Air Force were dispatched to check the plane, and they indeed found that the landing gear was retracted. The first officer now contacted experts via radio to obtain some guidance on how to rectify the problem. 5 different fixes were attempted, but none of them worked. One of them was that the first officer got up and reset the circuit breaker of the alternate landing gear extension motor, but that didn't help. The alternate landing gear extension works by isolating the hydraulics that had failed anyway, by electrically releasing the hooks that hold the landing gear in the up position. The motor that is driving these release hooks is called the alternate extension motor and is protected by a circuit breaker. After the crew realized that the alternate extension method wouldn't work, they even attempted to lower the gear by flying an abrupt maneuver to yank the gear out. But this too didn't work. In the end, as the captain realized that the gear would not extend and that fuel was running low, he decided that he would land the plane on its belly without the landing gear. Fire services covered the runway with fire retardant foam and the plane started its approach. The slow development of the situation gave the media ample time to prepare, so now there is even footage of this unique approach and landing. The plane touched down on runway 33 at 14:19 local time. The landing was smooth and the direction of the plane matched that of the runway almost perfectly. Sparks erupted from the metal scraping over the runway, but they were quickly extinguished by the fire retardant foam. After the plane came to a halt on the runway, a small fire started inside the right engine, but it was quickly doused by the fire crews in attendance. The plane was evacuated, and amazingly to me, none of the 231 passengers or crew members were injured in the process. Quickly, the pilots were heralded as heroes, as is custom for spectacular incidents with a great outcome. After the aircraft was deemed safe, it was removed from the runway and brought to a hangar, where it was lifted up. A team of investigators and the police were allowed to enter the disabled plane. They were joined by the captain of the flight, Captain Tadeusz Szurona. I hope I said that right. Meticulously, the team examined the cockpit switch positions and the integrity of the systems and found everything in perfect order, except for one single circuit breaker that had popped. It was found in the open, that is the disabled position, as one can easily tell by the white ring that is visible. It is only visible if the circuit breaker has tripped or was pulled out by someone. The circuit breaker was the A1 circuit breaker, labeled BAT Bus Distor, which stands for Battery Bus Distribution. This means that this circuit breaker secures a circuit that is connected almost directly to the battery of the aircraft, thus protecting the following systems. I know this looks cryptic at first, but have a look at the last line of the list. Among the systems protected by the popped circuit breaker is the alternate gear extension motor. In fact, the alternate landing gear extension circuit was not only protected by one, but two circuit breakers. Let me illustrate that. From the battery, electricity first passes through the A1 circuit breaker, and in a second step through the F6 circuit breaker, before it finally passes through the motor that disengages the uplock hooks holding the landing gear. When the first officer sought help from the experts, they told him multiple times to check the circuit breakers and to reset the circuit breaker that controls the alternate gear extension motor, the F6 circuit breaker. The first officer reset this F6 breaker multiple times, but to no avail. This was due to the fact that the A1 circuit breaker was popped the entire time and no electricity would flow. But how could he miss an open circuit breaker, and why was the breaker tripped in the first place? The investigation determined that there had been no electrical fault that had opened the circuit breaker, and that it must have been in the correct position before departure. In the end, they found the answer for both questions, why the breaker was tripped and why the first officer had not seen it, in one simple item: the first officer's flight bag. You see, the A1 circuit breaker is located at the right cockpit sidewall, next to the first officer's seat at floor level. I do not know which designer at Boeing thought this was an appropriate location to put a circuit breaker, but well, there it is located. In this area, the first officers usually store their flight bags during the flight. However, this bears the risk that the circuit breaker is pulled inadvertently. Boeing knew about this problem from numerous reports about inadvertently pulled circuit breakers due to flight bags, cleaning equipment, or shoes coming in contact with the breakers. It even offered a non-mandatory cover for those circuit breakers that it sold to airlines at a price. For planes that were produced a bit later than the 767 in question here, this modification was even made standard, however the accident 767 was never modified. The A1 circuit breaker showed clear signs of scratches and abrasions. The investigation also figured out why the central hydraulic system had failed after departure in Newark. A hose connected to the landing gear had cracked at its fitting due to repeated kinking experienced during landing gear operation. So in the end, the event was a consequence of a hydraulic failure and a single circuit breaker that was most probably tripped by the first officer who, as he had always done and was expected of him, put his flight bag next to his seat. The final report on the matter listed several possible causes why he might have missed the A1 circuit breaker being open. Stress, the fact that the circuit breaker was hidden from view, and the fact that experts had assured him that F6 was the appropriate circuit breaker that controls the alternate extension motor. Additionally, there is the fact that pilots do not need to know every circuit breaker by heart. They are usually handled by maintenance, and pilots rarely use them. When we do, it usually happens under the guidance of qualified maintenance personnel. In the end, the plane was deemed too damaged to repair and was written off, especially since the airline anyway intended to replace the 767s with 787s in 2013, less than 2 years after the accident. The captain and his crew were decorated with medals of the highest order by the Polish president for their actions during this emergency. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked this week's video. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. See you next week.